Rotary axis part 3. This is where you should have left off from the last part 1 and 2. You should have turned from a square spindle into this round spindle. My dimension is 0.5 and I'm not sure what size you made, but it should be one like this. And this is the raster cut versus the rounding cut. The rounding cut, as you saw in the last video, takes a lot longer than this one does. This one sped up about 8 times what it normally takes. But if you notice the feed where it's cutting across, it's pretty nice that way. And the rotary axis just steps 0.1 each time.
Alright, the last time we left off, this is part 3, we had created a rod. So let's start a new file. And the new file will be rotary. That is rotary. The size is what we picked last time. And that allows us, this is all set up in part 2 video. So we'll set OK. What we're going to do now is create a toolpath that allows us to take that round dowel and make some indentations in it. So let's do our gadget wrapping, creating the round toolpath, because that's the first part that has to be done each time. I selected this one. This is all preset from before, and we explained these concepts in part 2. So we're going to skip the explanation in part 3. Everything's set up just like it was. That's just the first thing we need to do. And by doing that, if you remember from part 2, that creates our rounding toolpath, which creates, if we do a preview, it creates our round dowel. Now we're going to look at how do I put an indentation in there. And we're going to start off with a square indentation. So I'm going to actually take this round dowel and put some square indentations in it. That's what we're going to do today. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what we have. I'm going to put a part. I'm reach over and grab a guideline. Not too high. This turns it on and off. So I'm going to grab a guideline and drag it out to 0 point. The part that I'm going to make is going to be, because I have to compensate for a saw girth, is going to be point. Let me think for a second. The saw girth is about 0.05 in diameter, or in thickness. So I'm going to make a guide. It's going to be a relative to the guide that I have, and it's only going to be one that I'm going to make. The offset position is going to be 1 inch and 5/100. The 5/100 is the thickness of the saw blade. When I do that, that's the part that I'm going to make. It's going to fit in here. Every 1.05 inches I'm going to cut this out, and that'll let me a part right there. And that part is going to be a peg. Well, to fit in the hole, I have to make the peg in here cut away. And the distance for that is going to be a 1/2 inch. Well, how do I represent that? Well, what I do is I actually make a square, and for now we're going to make that square. The width is going to be, remember I said 0.5. That's the length of the peg. What's going to be the height? Well, actually the height is going to stretch. Let's create this first. Close it. The height is going to be the distance from there to there. Just zoom in so you can see it. If this makes sense to you. What we're going to do is I'm going to cut away this piece to make a round dowel. Here it is my peg, and I'll show you that after this video. In fact, I'm going to do one in front of this so that you can see what the finished product is first, and then I'll show you at the end as well.
Here's a quick look at the pegs that I'm making, or we're making.
So I can do it a couple ways. I can measure this distance from here to here and input that, or I can simply grab a hold of that handle right there No, that's not the handle I want, because I don't want to move it. I want to enlarge it. And I don't know why it's not letting me grab the handle I want. I'll take that one. See how that stretches it? I don't want to stretch the, remember I want 0.5 here. I'm going to drag it up like that. And I'm going to go past this. The reason I go past this is if you don't go past it, what it does, it comes up to that edge and a little dimple right there and there where the tooling starts. Because the edge of the tooling will go there and stop, so that'll leave a little material left on either side. The other problem that I just thought of, let's go back to our square. If I leave that highlighted and go back to our square, you'll see that I forgot to add on my width. See, it's 0.499. I need to make that width 0.5, which is what our width is for the peg, but I have a little piece that I'm sawing off, so I need to make it that much longer. And that's the part that I'm sawing away. And I apply that, that'll make it a little bit thicker. Now I need to line it up here, so I'm going to close that and move it back. Click here, click on the center, and just move it back over. So now it's lined up. Now how do I cut this out? Well, think of it as a flat piece of material. If I'm going to cut that pocket out, I need to come here to my pocket tool. And my start depth would be at 0, but the total thickness of the material, if you think about it, and this is what's going to be interesting. Let's make a circle and give you an example. Our radius is 0.5, remember? That created it out in space someplace. Let's fix that. So make it 0 and 1. Grade it. That's the dowel. When you wrap all this around, it goes around that dowel. Now, I want to make a diameter of 0.25, and that's the diameter of my peg. Let me close this. That's the diameter of my peg that goes in the hole. So I'm looking from the bottom of this after it's carved out, machined off. This piece here is my peg. This is the top handle I grab a hold of. And from here to there is a 1/2 inch, this material that I'm shaving away. So what is the distance that I'm going to go down? Well, I can think of it this way and mathematically figure it out, or I simply can go here, click there, and come up here, and look at it. See what it says. It says it's 0.13. That's the material I'm shaving away. Well, you're thinking, well, wait a minute, if it's a 0.5, why don't I take off, and I want a 1/4 left, I'm going to take off 0.25. Well, I can take off 0.25, but what happens when I do that is I take away all the material. Because the distance from the center as it's spinning to the top edge is the radius, which is half of the diameter. The diameter is 5, so if I shave off 0.25, there won't be anything left. So my depth over here then is going to be 0.13. I hope I didn't lose too many of them. If I did, I apologize. Hopefully you'll visually see it when you do it. Alright, so let's cut that pocket. We're going to call it our peg stem pocket. Now keep in mind, oops, got to select my vector. To select it, I have to close this, go back to that selection tool, select it, and calculate. So what happened then? A couple things. I'm going to preview this first so you can see it. Preview the visible toolpath. Boom. That was quick. Let's reset that and do it again. Right about here, I think is slow enough. Select it. Preview the visible toolpath. See what it did? It cleaned out that pocket. Slow it down a little bit more. And that's what you'd think it would do on a flat material. And it does. Reset. Preview visible path. See it cleaning out that pocket? Take 2 passes. And that creates our little peg right there that we want. And we're going to cut it off right there after it's all machined. So there it is. I've now machined a pocket into that dowel. Interesting. So that's pretty cool. But you have to learn to think in two-dimensional, like we did before, where we're machining this flat. And then it automatically wraps it around this dowel. So instead of moving in the Y direction becomes my rotational axis. So as it's cutting, it's rotating. So it doesn't go back and forth like it shows. This actually rotates, and as it rotates, that machining tool works its way down till you have a finished product right there. Now the feeds and speeds that we have, let's take a look at that. Right here is my feeds and speeds. 80 is what I told you we could do. I'm going to reduce this to about 20, the plunge rate. There's something else that I recommend that you do, and that is add a ramp. See the ramp right here? I'm going to add the ramp because what happens otherwise, what a ramp does is it slows this rotation down here, and it allows the tool, instead of just slamming to a depth of 0.06, it actually gradually lowers it down. So it slows it down and lets it ease in smoothly, and that prevents jerking in. So we're going to redo that, and it won't change the result if you look at it. Okay. But you will notice it when it actually cuts it. So I recommend highly when you're doing these to add your ramps. It's needed. Now, that gives us one peg. The problem is we need 8 of them. So how do we do that?
We're going to take a brief break to show you the round cut. This is the round cut. This is sped up 10 times, I think. And as you can see, it's actually cutting that down. This is the first pass, and it rotates. What we're going to change next to in the software is the raster cut, so it goes back and forth. So that'll be the next one, then I'll show you that cut. And then after that, we're going to do all 8 of them. So I'll show you how to do that in the software. So keep watching.
Well, we come over here. See this right here? Array copy. I don't know whether you've used that tool yet, but it's pretty cool. We're going to do an offset of an array. We're going to make one row, and we need 8 of these. Remember the columns? There's 8. So that's 1, and it's going to spread it out 8. Do you remember we're going to do a gap. The gap is the distance from here to here. An offset is the distance from this edge to the next one. So we're going to do offset. The Y direction is not going to move, so we're going to make that 0. The offset, if you remember, we set this up at 1.05. That was our distance from this point to this point. Let's try it. And we're going to group those, see? If you check this box, it allows it to group. Click. And we'll zoom out, see what you got. So you see it? Remember we made that circle out in space, so let's get rid of that. And zoom back. Now you see I've got 8 of them. So now if I come down here and do this, select the 8 of them instead of the 1, hit calculate, and hit preview, you'll see that, boom, watch what they do. I didn't hit reset, but that's okay. So it's carving the 3rd one, the 4th one, 5th one. When it gets done carving, it actually wraps them. Now keep in mind your bit is not going to go up and down this way. This is going to turn and rotate. And there we go. There's our finished product. And I take it off the lathe and I do it this way. Now, the problem I've had with this, and let me show you the difference. When you try this, I recommend you try it this way. And then when you see, I had some problems with vibration and the time it took to do it. So we're going to come in here and look at this again and make one more change. Instead of doing the offset method, I'm going to do what's called the raster method. And this speeds it up tremendously. I'm going to recalculate it. That's the only change I made. You notice your tool pattern went, whoa, what is that? Oh, watch this. Instead of going this rotating, the tool is going to go back and forth. And that's much quicker than the rotation of my Y axis. I want to reset it. I'm going to do a preview again. You see it going back and forth? You notice down here at the bottom that there's a little lip that I told you about? And it looks like there's little jagged edges here. There's not really when it comes down because it's close enough that the bit gets that. And what happens when you do it that way is your bit's going back and forth this way and doing most of the machining instead of doing the machining as this rotates. And it's a little quicker. It works quicker, there's less vibration, and it gives you a job that's pretty clean. So that's the tricks I've learned in doing it. So now we've got our part. And you'll see at the end of the video here, it machines. I've got a video of it machining it. So have fun. This is part 3. Part 4, we'll look at putting some different shapes in here. Have a great day and have fun with your CNC.
Now this is the raster cut. See how it's going back and forth and cutting the top off? It's going to do the same thing once it gets the round rod, the square rod into a round rod. I guess it is a square piece of wood into the round. It's going to cut the one on the far right. I found that if I cut from right to left instead of left to right, the vibration is less because as I come across, it's firmly held better, if you will, or more firmly held on the left side where it clamps in there. So I rearranged the way I actually cut it. What I did is instead of having all 8 of those grouped as one and let it figure out where to start, I grouped them with the individually and did the first one on the right first, and then I made 8 separate ones. Now if you notice, see what it's doing, going back and forth as it spins. That's the raster cut. So it cuts faster, I found, when it does that. And I've slowed it down so that it actually takes, I think, 4 passes. And that way I get a smoother rod when I'm done. The reason that wood is curling is because I don't have a sharp bit. The bits I have are dull and almost wore out, I guess. I found a company in Grand Rapids, Michigan that'll resharpen these for $5. And you can use it for projects like this, but if you need an exact 0.25 cut, you have to mic each one before you use it. Because as I sharpen it, it makes it smaller. But on this one, you know, it doesn't matter that much. I don't have to change my dimensions. If it's off just a little bit for a peg, it doesn't matter that much. But if you notice, I do ramp it down. So when it first starts, you'll see that it ramps down a little bit. This is sped up quite a bit. It takes 30 minutes to do one of these from start to finish. So the other trick I've learned is the block on the far right where it touches that. I put one little drop of oil in that before I attach it to the machine. And it's far enough in that it doesn't seep into where the parts that I use. And that keeps it lubricated and keeps the friction down a little bit as it's spinning. You don't have to do that, but I chose to do it because I'm making such a small rod that the vibration can be a little bit aggravating. So I hope you've enjoyed and learned something from this one. The next one, like I said before, what we're going to do is instead of making a square box down, we're actually going to make a tapered shaft. How do I make a taper in a round rod? And the other part of that is how do I put letters that actually wrap around that rod? So we're going to do that next. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit and progress and do a little bit more with your CNC and have fun doing it. It's kind of great to keep your mind going and learn a little bit each day. That's my philosophy. Of course, I'm a retired teacher, so I enjoy learning. Hope you've learned something and had fun with your CNC, and be careful, play safe, and enjoy the day. Thanks for watching. Oh, this last pass, let me tell you about that. You notice the burrs will disappear. This is a pass at 0.03. So I've dropped it down 0.03 to actually get rid of the burrs. Take care.